Hello, this is Aaron Wissner of Local Future, and I'm here, my second call with DiAnna Ritola. DiAnna, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
I'm very well. It's nice to see you today.
It's good to see you too.
So today it is, let's see, May the 28th, 2020, and I shared a piece I wrote this morning with you, and I was wondering if we could maybe discuss it, but since the viewer is not going to have seen this, then we're going to kind of have to start from somewhere. So do you have a starting spot, or should we maybe try to figure that out?
Yeah, let's try to figure out where a good starting point would be.
So what I was responding to this morning was I haven't been sleeping particularly well, actually, because we're during this kind of really stressful phase right now, and what's going on. It's just very stressful, and I don't think I'm the only person that's stressed out. Are you seeing?
I am. All of my friends are having crazy sleep and weird dreams, including me. So I think that this is. I actually read an article by a psychologist who was saying that uh, when you take away the normal activities that your brain is occupied with, it opens up other doors. So when most people are not doing the routines they've been comfortable with, school, work, see friends and family in the same way, that the brain's trying to like fill in those gaps with other things. And sleep is when we're supposed to be repairing ourselves, but it also seems the time when the brain's like, guess what I can think about now, because I don't have to think about a regular schedule or how we're going to do the child drop-off pickup routine tomorrow. So it was an article maybe back at the beginning of this month. Time has been also a very squishy thing in the last 2.5 months, where some days can feel 1,000 years long, and all of a sudden it's May 28th, and I wonder what happened to the rest of the month. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So anyway, I fell asleep around, I don't know, midnight, which is earlier than it typically was. And I didn't have sex or anything yesterday, so I didn't have that release, which sometimes is helpful.
Sure.
And I think I did one sleep cycle, maybe two, because sleep cycles are what, 90 to 100 minutes, something like that.
Depending on who you are, sometimes 45.
Yeah, well, it wasn't many, but then I was awake. I was like, oh, I want to see what's going on, because especially with yesterday, there was the remark by there was a remark about the possibility of social media being restricted.
Yes.
And I was concerned about that, because in order for us to stay connected to one another, that this is the tool we're using right now, social media.
Okay. Yeah.
And we need to be able to feel like we can talk to our friends and family as much as we want about whatever we want, and have freedom of speech and communication. So I felt very threatened by that. And so yesterday I posted something that I wasn't planning on posting quite yet, but I did because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't like holding on to something and no one would ever see it again.
Right.
And then this morning, when I got up at 2 a.m. or whatever, and I looked on my social media feed, I saw this one of my friends from high school. She was actually the older sister of one of my classmates, and she was posting that there's this idea that if people open their shops before the state allows them to, then they're going to have like they're going to be put in jail or something, or imprisoned, or they're going to be given this really huge fine, and it's going to, you know, destroy their business. And so that was the piece I wrote this morning.
So can I stop you for a second?
Absolutely.
So was her comment, because I did see your post, but I didn't, you know, read the whole thing or follow the commentary actually. But so was her concern for people who wanted to go in advance of the sort of the rules of law at this point, or the way that we're trying to do things, and she was supportive of people opening their shops prior to following all the protocols? Or was she saying, oh, I hope people don't do that because we're trying to follow rules?
Well, interestingly, she has been wanting, you know, people to have their ability to open up their shops so they have their livelihood, because she can see how many of her, not necessarily even her friends, but maybe the friends of her friends, the community,
people that she knows or she's acquainted with.
Yeah, and they're really suffering because obviously the central authority, powers, whatever, is not really taking care of people right now. We got some of us, you know, I don't even know if it's half of us, maybe it's a third of us, got this one check, which was April 15th now. So it's almost 6 weeks later.
Yeah.
And
it was, depending on your living situation, barely enough to survive on for a couple of weeks.
Right. And most people in the year 2020 in the US are living from paycheck to paycheck, as in when they get to their paycheck, they pay all their bills and they pay enough on their credit card so they can make it to the next paycheck. Exactly. You know, they don't have any, they didn't have any slush at all.
Right. There's very few people that have any sort of a cushion for emergencies even, right? And what they do have might be a couple $100, which, as you know, would get you in the door of an emergency room, should you choose to go there, right? Like, you know, that's not hardly anything. And so I totally understand people being concerned, to put it mildly, about their ability to function in a world and in a society that has said, you work or you die. That's your two choices. And that's a very real fear.
And I'm not sure to what extent my friend is personally in that boat.
Right.
But even if it's, I mean, even if she's scared for her friends and her friends' friends or family members or whatever, and she didn't say she was scared, but this is kind of the sense. I mean, how could you not be scared if you don't have, if you're not confident you're going to be able to feed yourself and your family in a week from now? Right, exactly. With the threat of being evicted by force by someone that's going to come and with guns and tell you have to leave your house, like not guns in their hands, but guns in their holsters. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a real fear for not just a few of us. I mean, I'm personally not in this boat, so, but my friends, many of my friends are in this boat.
Yeah. Yeah. I am not fearful of losing my housing, but my wife is a firefighter. So unless something drastic happens to the economy of the city of New York, she's going to have a job. But my children cannot afford to live on their own, right? They don't have the ability to move out. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not so great. So, do you
have a ring? I can pause the call.
It's actually the doorbell, and they're just announcing that they have left another package of my books. Oh, and you'll see, there goes my daughter.
Nice.
With a door that's sticky because it's humid today. Anyway, so yeah, the idea that we are all one paycheck away or less than that from devastation isn't anything new. for many years as a single mom, I was almost robbing Peter to pay Paul. Sometimes there had been times where I was, asking friends for money to pay a bill before the tax refund came back or something like that, where I was, got caught where I had managed to keep steady fairly well along, but then something larger happened, or the children needed some sort of special equipment for school, or an activity that wasn't in the planned budget. So there were times where things got scary. Was I going to be able to make the rent? Was I going to be able to pay the utility bills? And I can understand where, if I were a business owner and not seeing any income and not knowing when that income would arrive or when I would be allowed to even start the process of it, that would compound all of those fears of safety and security and health and family. So it sounds like your friend was making a note of these fears are existing.
Not so much in her post. I mean, the post was from this group. It's called the Mackinac Center. The Mackinac Center for Public Policy. And what it is, it's a nonprofit group that is funded by foundations and corporations that are in turn funded by some millionaires and billionaires like Charles Koch and some various people. There's somebody from Wisconsin, but various millionaires and business owners of stuff.
Right.
And my understanding of the Mackinac Center for Public Policy comes from being a public school teacher for 25 years before I retired in Michigan, and first hearing about it back in, 2000 or maybe earlier. And then during the Great Recession, it was, very active in the state legislature. And Michigan has the weakest state legislature of any state in the nation. What makes it weak is that, suppose you're the very best person to be a state legislator or a representative, you're not allowed to run. And you know why?
My thought process behind that indicates that there would be some special interest groups that have created some sort of loopholes that move people out of the way.
It's more insidious than that.
Okay.
It's something called term limits.
Oh, okay.
So if you're the most experienced person, you understand how it all works and everything, you've been 6 years in the job, we're not allowed to vote for you because you're not allowed to run anymore.
And what is a term? Is a term 6 years?
2 years.
All right. So a person in the legislature is allowed one elected cycle and 2 re-election cycles.
Exactly.
And then they're done. Okay.
Then they're done forever, for their entire life, even though they could be the very best person, because they finally got 6 years of knowledge here.
Right.
On how to do things.
Right. So who is advising newcomers?
The people who
special interest groups.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. And so if my understanding of the very bland term Mackinac Center for Public Policy is it sounds like we know what we're doing and we've got a whole lot going on and we have experts in law, which is great if what is actually happening is policy for the public and not policy for business owners. And that is often not the case when they say public policy.
Yes. We also have, we have the House side. We also have the Senate side of the legislature. A person could do 6 years in the House and then 2 terms in the legislature, or vice versa, or any mix.
Okay.
So that'd be 8 years there. But in either case, 14 years. Well, I have to tell you, I did not become a master teacher in my first 14 years of teaching. I didn't. I mean, it was towards, I mean, I continued getting better and better and better all the way up to my retirement. I mean, the year I retired, which was just a year and a half ago, was my most effective teaching year ever, as far as I had great rapport, not with just my students, with everybody in the, most everybody in the school district.
Sure.
I knew everybody more or less, except for maybe some of the incoming staff. I knew the superintendent, I knew the Board of Education, I knew all the teachers, I knew the students knew me, I had a reputation, some good, some bad.
Sure.
But I was at my very most effective because I knew the culture. I was fully immersed in it. I knew the traditions. I knew all of it.
Okay.
And yet in Michigan, we have these term limits, and it's not even just on the legislators, it's also on the governor. So suppose we have a governor who is just loved, ultimately loved by everybody, and she does a great job, or he does a great job for 2 terms, 8 years. Everyone would elect them. Nope, they can't be a candidate. It's against the Constitution. Can't have them as a candidate. Why not? Well, because that's what it says in the Constitution. So you have someone who's ultimately the most knowledgeable person about how to be an executive and how to help people, and yet, boom. So in this case right now, our governor, her name's Gretchen Whitmer, and she, if I remember correctly, she did exactly what I said. She did 6 years in the House, 8 years in the Senate. Then she took a few years off with the kids. Okay. Everybody wanted her. I mean, a lot of people loved, because she would speak truth. I mean,
I have seen several interviews, and yes. I'm impressed. She's strong, and she's articulate, and she doesn't back down, but she also doesn't pick a fight, right? She doesn't antagonize for the sake of antagonizing.
Yes. Well, and I want to clarify it. I don't think she has the I don't think she has the charisma and natural warmth of someone like Jacinda Ardern.
Well, no, but who does? I mean, Jacinda could come and, change your baby's diaper and start dinner and, rule New Zealand from afar. She has a different skill set. And yeah, she's just a different human. So that, yeah, not everyone can be Jacinda. The one wish we had more.
Well, and we have a particular organizational system here in the States, which is not the same as New Zealand.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a very top-down structure. It's this representative democracy structure, and it's very, it's rules-oriented, totally time-oriented. Everything is, this time and this time and this time, if you're in the House or the Senate, and everything is just, I mean, even the terms, it's all about time. Everything is like, go, 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 go.
Right. And
it's rushed.
So I don't want to totally get focused on the term limits, but I am interested simply because it is something that doesn't happen at the federal level in a way that I think has been detrimental to the running of this country. That certain people are there for 35 years when they're actually not as effective as they could be because they are listening to only certain voices. And so I would like to, I don't know what the balance is, because I do think that there needs to be a level of experience that goes along with legislation, right? If you are tasked with the job of enacting policies and laws that care for the most amount of people, I would like you to have some experience to do that. I also don't want you to be there for 35 years moldering and only listening to 5 people who line your pockets on a regular basis with compliments, cash, and prizes. So again, I don't know what the optimum level is, but I hear what you're saying, that inexperience has made your state legislature weakened and therefore not as effective as it could be.
Well, it's taken the power out of the hands of the public. Mm-hmm. And granted, the state legislators and senators are not paid all that much. I mean, they get paid maybe $80,000 a year, which might sound a lot to some people, but as far as if they're professional, if they're a doctor or a lawyer or something, this is a step down. So
yeah, public service always is, right? Like that's generally people go into public service knowing that they're going to get some sort of compensatory pension-ish thing. So they take less money.
well, and this is only if you do the full 6 years, then you get the
Right.
pension or the medical benefits, or you do the full 8 years. You don't have to do both, but you have to do one. You have to do the whole thing to the end. And yeah, and then the campaigns, of course, people get. I mean, the campaigns. The only way to win at the moment, it appears, is to have huge amounts of money to put on TV advertising and internet advertising and newspaper advertising and to host rallies and to do all these things.
Travel around.
And where's this money come from? I mean, it does. I mean, it can, like in Bernie Sanders's case, it can come from a whole mass of people, but it takes, you know, hundreds of thousands of people all contributing small amounts regularly.
Right.
Versus someone who doesn't have that sort of support, where are they going to go?
Exactly.
Which is to the owners, obviously.
Yes.
For the viewer, we know you're here.
Yeah.
But this goes back to this thing. So what I was trying to point out to my friend was that this Mackinac Center for Public Policy is actually being funded by owners. And the owners, what is the owner's interest? Well, the owner's interest, of course, right now, the owners are kind of in the same boat as us.
Sort of.
They can't go out to the fancy restaurants because they're not open. They can't go get the certain things in the grocery store that they want because they're not available. They can't go flying where they want to because the flights aren't active. They can't go to Mackinac Island because the island's not open. They can take their private planes if they have one, but you know, people don't really like seeing them walking around and stuff. They might be able to go to a marina and take their boat out, but people are going to see that. So, and their money's not coming in anymore because they don't work. So since they don't work, their only income is from the people that work from them. You know, making stuff to sell or, you know, running a business or whatever. So they have this huge incentive to want things to open up so they get their money back.
Absolutely. You know, flowing. Yes.
Yeah. Get the flow started again. But somehow I don't remember how I got to this. As I was writing it, I was thinking about, you know, this is really about control, really is what it is about. And it's about, you know, who are the people who are most likely to be listening to that? And I think it's people who have had a controlling household when they grew up.
Okay. Now, the way you may say that makes me think that that you are telling me that people are going with what's familiar, right? Like your family. Familiar means like your family. So if you see a strong leader who is familiar, i.e. like a parent from your own household, it strikes a resonance with you, and you may have a tendency to lose your critical thinking and go with the strong leader.
Especially when you're scared.
Absolutely.
For your food.
Because, well, the limbic brain kicks in and you go with, I just want to be safe. Where's safety? Who is the safe person? I mean, we see it in movies all the time, right? You've got one big guy with 1 or 16 big guns, and he's going to save the day, and he's going to run through.
Arnold.
He's going to get a scratch here, and he's going to get some dirt here, and he's going to run and tumble, and he's going to Jackie Chan his way through a bunch of different stuff, all while wearing very inappropriate clothing. But
it's a whole genre, isn't it?
Right. But
it's like the prime genre.
But he's going to be the guy, the savior guy.
The hero.
Right, the hero, because we've come to expect that the hero is an actual human, only one at a time, rather than the hero is the collective who shifts the balance of power and then chooses a new way of being. I mean, if you go to the hero's journey, right, the person, representative of the community, goes out, comes across challenges, finds some guides, listens to them after first scoffing at them, right? Changes behaviors, changes the way in which that person sees and interacts with the world, and then brings that knowledge back to the community. But it's never just one person, right? Because we're all on our own journey, and we don't ever operate in isolation. So the fantasy of the hero who will save us all, whether that's a religious figure or a political figure or a Arnold Schwarzenegger figure, and I know that we are dating ourselves right now by saying Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's now an old man and incapable of that, but you know, I don't even know.
There's all those new, like the Fast and Furious movies.
Yes, he's Dwayne Johnson, except he's never funny, right? Yeah. Like the hero can also not be funny.
Oh no, he can though.
Well, he can now because of Dwayne Johnson.
He could be almost ridiculous sometimes.
Right. And he can play a cartoon character and sing. My favorite movie. Just so you know.
I have to say that this genre is something that I've grown up with, and so I'm used to it.
Yeah.
And it's really weird because as a parent, I don't like to show that stuff to the kids, the boys.
Mm-hmm.
Because
it's violent.
Well, and I don't know if I revealed to you last time that, and this is perhaps not directly relevant, but well, it is directly relevant. It's just kind of an aside. It's not an aside. It's
adjacent.
It's adjacent. So, as a teacher during the summer, before kids, with spouse working, a lot of free time in the summer. Back in the 90s.
Right.
I mean, could take some classes, could go to the beach. But when a person's free, you know, they generally want to learn and explore stuff. And this was during the advent of the internet and the World Wide Web and all sorts of amazing stuff that people were writing, so fascinating. And so a few years prior to that,
you're so far much farther ahead than I am on this stuff because I was having babies then.
So prior to that, I was like this. I remember there was a video rental store. We lived in near Grand Rapids in Wyoming on Taft Avenue, right behind the Arby's. And down from us, there was this video rental store. I don't remember if it was a Blockbuster or a movie gallery or whatever it was, but it was like $1 rentals. And so during the summer, I would just go down there and I would get like 5 of them and I'd just watch movies all day. Well, when the internet came available, it was so much more interesting. And we were living in Cutlerville at the time, which is also behind the Arby's, but I had my computer and
theme going.
Yeah, I was connected to the internet. Well, eventually I got around to
squeak. Yeah. That dial-up modem sound.
Yes.
That was awesome. I love that.
So that's how I started becoming part of the global brain. For those of you that get that idea, and you'll be like, oh, that's where Aaron started becoming the part. Okay. So anyway, I had always remember when we went to camp. We talked about this last time, and I went to the ethics class. So at the ethics class, we did all these questions about, hey, you know, if there's a child in the street and a car is coming, you're going to run out and save them, right? Of course you're going to run out and save them.
Right. So what would you do if?
Right. And if there's a car in the street and a train's coming, like a trolley,
right.
streetcar.
Who dies? Who's more worthy?
Well, not even that, but you're going to at least take the action to go over and turn the thing, right? So that it goes down the other street, which is vacant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it could get more complicated. It can be like the kids playing and, you know, the elderly woman crossing over here. But so these were the types of scenarios we did for 3 hours a day for 2 weeks. So 10 times through 30 hours or something like that. And it was all like simulations and stuff. And after that, I came out of that camp, the Summer Institute for Arts and Sciences, 1987, Western Michigan University, with you.
Right, because we were not the only ones. Other camps were going on at different universities around the state.
Yeah, there were 5 of them, and there were 100 each camp. So there was 500 of us all together that year. And that wasn't the only year. That was,
it's been going on for a while.
yeah, I don't know if I doubt it's still going on, but
Probably not.
Anyway, after that, I was like, oh my gosh, you know, this is my worldview now. This is my life stance, that, you know, it really matters that you do things that you minimize harm. So this is this is what people would call this, if you're looking for a word for this, it's called utilitarianism. Utilitarianism.
Okay.
And it's a certain sort of ethic. At the time, I thought it was the only ethics there is. The measuring of life versus life.
Yeah.
What's that?
When you're young, it's hard, when you're young, it's hard to know all of the things. So you're like, oh, I've got the one thing, I know the way.
So anyway, do you remember when we did, when there was that famine in the 70s in Africa and we were all asked to donate? Do you remember that?
In the 70s? Or
maybe it was the 80s.
In the 80s when they did, when they did We Are the World and
the rice bowls and everything, and you collected the money?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I had been very concerned about that then, of course, obviously. And this was before our camp. And then, so this was around 2002 or something. I was thinking about this again. I was thinking, you know, there's this poverty thing in Africa still has not been solved. How can we solve this poverty thing? And I thought, well, you know, I've got some time. Why don't I look into it? And so I looked into it, and somehow I came across this paper by an ethicist out of Australia. His name's Peter Singer. And he'd written this paper, and the paper basically described one of those scenarios where, well, you don't want anybody to suffer, do you? No. I mean, you wouldn't just go up to somebody and wring their neck or twist their arm, would you? No. Well, and actually starting before that, you don't want to suffer, do you? No. You don't want someone coming up and twisting your neck, do you? No, of course not. You don't want them twisting your arm, do you? No. You don't want them, you know, cutting you with a knife or locking you in a box, or you don't want any of this stuff, do you? No, of course not. And you certainly wouldn't do that with your family members or friends, would you? Of course not. And you probably just don't want to ever feel like you're doing that to anyone, do you? Well, of course not. Of course I don't want to ever feel like I'm ever doing that to anybody. That was that was his argument. And they said, well, you know, by not funding food aid to countries that need food, you're kind of doing that because the kids are suffering, and you know that they're suffering, and you know that they wouldn't be hungry if only you gave them some money so they could buy some rice and whatnot. And so you should really be doing that, and you should be doing like a certain percentage. Tithing, basically. Did you do, like, you went to Catholic church, right?
Yeah, I don't ever remember them calling it tithing. That was more of a Protestant term.
But you passed around the plate and had the donation.
Yeah, exactly. My parents they you know, made the check out every week. They put it in this special envelope. They put that in there. It was, you know, they figured their budget based on whatever they figured their budget on. We were not allowed to know about money. That was magic. Right? But you're right.
It's still magic for most people.
It still is kind of magic. Just like this whole internet magic.
Oh, yeah.
So the idea of not causing suffering then gets extrapolated to, well, so when you would not send money, and I would not send money. But then there's the what others what other things are we putting our money toward? Well, are we going to fund this rebel group in, Chad, because they're fighting against communism, and that word is scary and awful to us. And then, right, like we just hate that word, even though most people couldn't define it if they tried.
I bet if you said you cannot use that word, now describe it, and then they described it, they'd be describing something totally different. They'd be describing authoritarianism.
Yeah, I'm sure they would, because we've been taught that communism equals Joseph Stalin, who had people killed, and therefore that's bad. Whereas communism, part of community, how we care for each other, everyone gets their needs met. That seems like a good thing. And here we are back at ground zero of trying to figure out how to be ethical people.
Well, this extends to the next bit, which was, so I looked for something else written by Peter Singer, and the only book I could find in the Bear Lake Library, which is a stinky little, it's like one room. It's one room with some shelves in it.
It's 6 shelves. It's all you got. In fact, it's what you have behind you, really.
This actually, if I filled this room with books, it would be the same size as the library we had in Bear Lake at the time. So anyway, well, that's not true. The new library had been built, but it's like a very small house. Anyway, I found the only book they had. It was called Animal Liberation. I'm like, okay, so I don't know what that's about, but it's by Peter Singer. I'll read it. And I flipped past the preface, and he went all into the utilitarian argument, and I was like, yeah, I'm with this. I'm with this. Yeah, I get it. Tell me what else. Tell me what else. And so chapter 2, it's about hamburger. I'm like, hamburger? What's hamburger to have to do with this?
Oh, so Animal Liberation. It's the How to Be Vegan book?
No, it's not How to Be Vegan. It's there are How to Be Vegan books, but this book just is describing what goes on in confined animal feeding operations, also called factory farms. Right. And it describes in great detail what happens to these animals as far as all their freedoms taken away, their life is cut short, they suffer because of the situation where they have no, yes, and they're packed in very closely. And it talks about each chapter was about like a different domesticated animal species. So there's like the beef cattle, and then there's the milk cows, and then the veal calves, and then it goes into the pigs and the gestation crates, and then it goes into the chickens and the turkeys, and it even goes, I mean, it goes into the sheep, and then it goes into animals used in entertainment, like in circuses and rodeos, and then it goes into animals used in labs, like for testing of medicine and cosmetics. Yeah, it goes into cosmetics. It does like the whole. It has, I don't know how many. I've got it up on the shelf over here.
I'm sure it has one horrifying, heartbreaking story after another, designed to make you, the reader, go, my life is totally dependent on these animals, and I'm treating them like crap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, do you remember when you came to the lake at Bear Lake? Mm-hmm. And we went swimming? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, there was a hammock there. And so I was in Bear Lake. That was during the summer. I laid in the hammock and I read this book. Nobody was there, just me reading this book for like 2 days. Mm-hmm. By the time I was done, I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to buy any more animal products ever again for the rest of my life. And I haven't. And
that is powerful.
Well, it was transformative in 2 ways. Number one, it aligned my innate feeling for compassion for people and love. Mm-hmm. I mean, not for people in specific, like my kids.
Right, no, but as a general humankind.
Yes. Yeah. Compassion. And did we talk last time about kind of the evolutionary reasoning for that compassion? And I don't remember if we did or not.
Probably not.
Okay.
I mean, we can talk about that, but I don't know if we're going that way. So we can come back to that.
Well, I don't know how much time you have either. So.
And I was just going to check my time. Okay, so we've been here for almost an hour. I'll give you another half.
Okay.
All right.
Let's set a timer then. So let's go back to this article for a moment while I'm setting the timer.
Right.
Yeah, so in any event, it's not actually, I mean, I just stopped buying animal products or using animal products. I stopped going to places where animals were being used for entertainment. That included zoos or anything. And this practice has continued for my entire life since then. And I've raised the boys based on that, and not being violent. So like when we watch films, I have all the films like age rated, not based on what the MPAA puts down, but based on how much violence is in there. If anyone is ever killed, that goes like up to teenage years, unless it's like a car accident or a natural caused death. No murders ever. So they've never seen a murder on film, or animal torture or anything like this. It kind of really narrows. It really quickly narrows down the selection of films that I've seen, because I've seen all those
absolutely.
films.
Yeah.
But and this is on what is called the nurturing side of things, the compassionate side. As a parent, that's kind of the nurturing side, that we don't hurt each other. And the other side is the strict side, which is the do it right now, because you need to do it right now. And I'm gonna need help here getting us to this end of this conversation.
All right. So one of the things that you wrote in your response to that friend of yours was that we as a society have come to this place where we are responsive to the powerful leader because that's familiar to us, and we are scared, especially right now.
Some of us, depending on our parenting.
Some of us, right. But more often than not, because most of our parents and most of their parents and most of their parents were raised also in an authoritarian way, because that mimics and mirrors the culture, the religious culture, the political culture, wherever you come from. Patriarchy, the power over model, primarily men over women, but not always, depending on your family or your particular location, but the power over model gives us the training that says, you are not so good, or you are not worthy of making all decisions. And this person, because of their age, because of their financial status, because of their rank, because of whatever, gets to make those decisions for you. Now, in a nurturing model, what happens in a family is that power is actually something that we can discuss, right? You don't do it because I say you do. You do it because I actually have more experience and knowledge about this particular experience and activity that you would like to do. I'm willing to have your input about why you would like to do it. And sometimes I get to make the final decision of whether that's going to happen or not, because I can see larger picture things than you can, because your brain is different than mine, right? Like that's, but that it doesn't negate the younger person's ability to want something, or their ability to do their best to negotiate for it. Like there were a lot of times with my kids that I said, I'm going to say no, but if you disagree with me, you tell me why, and I will reconsider my decision. And sometimes, at least half the time, they came up with a good enough argument that I was like, sure, go ahead. Let me know how that turns out, right? It wasn't when they came crying back to me, I said, I told you so. Okay, a couple of times, right? I'm human, right? But more often it was, okay, what did we learn from this? Did we learn that sometimes you don't know the limits of your abilities, or that sometimes you can't trust people in the same way that you would like to trust them. Does that mean you should stop trusting people? No, it shouldn't. It means that perhaps you need more information. And so, but like I said to you in my response to your article or essay, I have tremendous rage when I don't get my own way. Not every single time, but ultimately it's the rage of not getting my own way that makes me authoritarian. If in my mind, we have to leave the house by X time, and you small humans are not moving at the pace I want you to move, I am snapping my fingers because you have got to hurry yourselves up because my time is the right time. Now, I also tried to be nurturing on the front end of that and say, I want to leave by this time. We need to get things moving, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes that worked. Sometimes we left the house and things were fine. Sometimes that did not work. And then I got to deal with my own sense of disempowerment, which led to rage. And what I didn't know for a long time into my adult years was that rage was so tremendous because I never was allowed to express anger or rage toward authority as a young person. And I think that it fuels my rage and my sense of despair sometimes against the powers that are so far removed from my existence, but that seem to have direct influence. So like government officials, lawmakers. Now, one way of dealing with that is to become more involved in community affairs. But there's still multiple levels because we've created the system that has.
I would say the system has evolved. I wouldn't say we created it.
Okay, I'll go with a hybrid of that because the system didn't evolve on its own, right? Like there was human input into how the system happened.
I would say it's a tragedy of the commons, basically.
I would go with that some things got put in place. And then people were like, well, if we did it this far, we could take it this far, and we could take it this far. And all of a sudden, we're stuck with this. We're not stuck, but we are enmeshed in a system that actually doesn't support, nor nurture, nor actually even like humans. It likes the system. It loves itself. It loves the process. It loves the financial thrill of it all, but it doesn't actually like or support or nurture human life. And we see that played out across the spectrum, from healthcare to policing to financial institutions to education, right? Like you have seen it all.
And back to parenting again.
Response. And back to parenting, right? And so one of the things I think you were trying to convey to this friend of yours is that while she may be supportive of the rhetoric of Mackinac Center, if you look deeper than that at what their rhetoric actually means, because rhetoric, as we know, is it's a lot of rainbow over here, don't look at the bomb. Oh, look at this fabulous thing we're doing over here, but don't pay attention to who we stepped on to do that. And I think that having something like the Mackinac Center for Public Policy promote something that doesn't seem to take into account a vaster and more holistic approach to how community works. There are certain people who are supposed to benefit from that model, and certain people who are supposed to be sacrificed, whether that's financially sacrificed or physically sacrificed.
Like that comment that came out of Texas last month about, if some people have to die in order for us to open the economy, then I think they'll be okay. They'll
just go ahead and do it. They'll just off themselves right now. And, and so then I've also seen people talk about, well, people are going to die anyway, which is absolutely true. Humans die every day. But if we have the ability to mitigate suffering prior to death, shouldn't that be something we strive for? Right? Like, obviously, I'm going to die. You're going to die. Nobody gets out of this life alive. But choosing to say, well, these whole people in Detroit, because they're poor, they're Black, they have a food desert where they can only get Twinkies and, high C or whatever, because they live in an area that we've neglected as a state, as a group of humans. And we've said, you don't matter over here. Well, you're going to die anyway.
Well, and
That's bullshit.
the thing that drives me crazy about that is the blaming, because
Right.
suppose you're in 7th grade there, and you're poor, and you grow up and you have no money, and the only way to get food is that you steal something to get some money to get some food, and then you're incarcerated for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. Or you're brutalized by either someone in the community or by the police or whatever.
Right.
And it's not your fault that you were born into this particular household. I mean, you have no control of that. You have no control. My belief is that people have absolutely zero control over their past, but they have full control over their future. And so you can't blame people for their past. It's not, they have no control over that. That was the result of everything around them. But their future, you have an opportunity to influence, because you are now interacting with them in that future. So you have, each of us has control, not control, but we have agency in the future.
Yes.
Whereas in the past,
to a limited degree.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like, my ability to control my future is limited by a few things, right? And someone who grew up in a different situation has different limitations and or different areas of growth, right? I don't expect that at some point I am going to own a Ferrari. I could, if I decided that was a goal, do some things and tweak my life and whatever to own said Ferrari. But I'm limited by my kind of disgust over big expensive cars, but also by the fact that isn't something that is conducive to my lifestyle now. So in order to get to that goal, I would have to shift a whole lot of other things. And that is a limitation. But, I could do some things. And I'm also limited by my physical existence. I am not going to be an NBA player. I can't do that right now. In fact, I could never do that because I'm not a dude. Right? I could be a WNBA player if I'd actually.
You're also not 7 feet tall, DiAnna, unless I remember.
I am not. No, I'm 5'8" and rapidly shrinking. Yeah, and I think you're what, 6'2", 6'3"?
Oh, thank you so much. Only 6 feet.
Okay.
It's enough.
It's enough. It's because you still have all your hair, and so it's a little extra fluff.
It's the 3 months without a cut.
I know. It's gonna.
Your hair's looking really full too.
I cut my own hair and have for 20 years, so this is exactly how I like it.
Nice.
But getting back to your thoughts about parenting, then, is that we've gotten to this place where the authority and the authoritarianism feels so familiar to those of us who were raised in very strict authoritarian households. And so while we may experience all of that rage, our tools to combat that are actually somewhat limited. And when we are
because as children, we weren't given the enormous amount of time that a nurturing, like when there's an issue, like in the house, my response is typically, we need to go now because I want to go now. Mm-hmm. So authoritarianism, whatever the definition is, the word time is in the definition, because it's about time. It's about doing things in a certain time. Like the zebra on the prairie, in the herd, there's the alpha male, who's the one who's watching for the lion. And the alpha male, that's all his job is. That's all he does. He's the one who watches for the lion. He's always got his head up. He's the tall one. He's always looking out. He's hyper alert. And then as soon as he sees the lion, he freezes, he alerts, mack, 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 mack. And then the entire herd is supposed to look at him and follow him. And that's the survival mechanism that exists in mammals amongst other animals. Right. So, and this comes from the limbic, you know, the reptilian part of the brain. Absolutely. Yeah. And right now, so that's the time thing. It's time. Right now, or you die. And if it wasn't a time thing, then that species wouldn't be here. I mean, if the herd wasn't responding, then those herds are not here anymore. There's probably a whole variety of interesting creatures that could have existed right now, but they didn't have that genetic coding in their DNA and their instincts. But on the other hand, I mean, most of the time, that's not how things are. All the zebras are perfectly free. They can go wherever they want. They can go over to see their brother over here, their brother over there. They can go see their cousin over there. They can go see their cousin. Hey, there's mom. I haven't seen her in a while. Aunt and uncle. And hey, that's one of my kids. Hey, how are you doing? And they have perfect freedom. But you know what they're never going to do? They're never going to go like walk 3 miles in that direction away from the herd.
Right, because they are prey animals, not predator animals. So they need to stay together for their own safety.
They're communal animals. They are community oriented.
They are also that. Excuse my dog.
That's all right.
Okay, so if what I'm hearing you say is that, I'm just going to rephrase that. So
yeah,
likening that to humans.
Exactly.
And this particular situation in which some people would like to get back to work faster than others, then
it makes sense because they're scared.
They're scared, and they're being controlled by their urgency with time. And time, as we know in this culture, is equal to money, right? Because there's the longer they are not working, the less money they have coming in. So there's that relationship of time and money.
Actually, and it's even more specific. Money is equal to life. It's equal to a certain amount of life.
Yes.
Because what money represents is it represents food. Food represents how long you can live. Absolutely. So money represents life, and life is time. So so yes, it's life and time. It's probably one or the other, but or both, or something like that.
Some sort of lovely mix of that. And so when people are scared, then time becomes urgent. At the same time, as well as being scared about not opening up, right? They're also scared that they will be infected and contract disease and be very ill, and or someone they know, right? Because even if they're not speaking that language, there is that underlying fear, because it's not like we all don't know somebody who's been sick, right? Or maybe that's just me, but there have been enough illnesses and enough death that we have some connection to that. It's not like a fantasy. It's not, or the famine in Africa where it's people that we can't see. And so there's that dualistic fear, and fear says, do something, right? So we've frozen for now. But you can only do that for so long, right? So shut down. Everybody stays home. But the limbic says, okay, well, you did that, but now you got to do the next thing. Run away or fight, right? And so fighting looks like fighting each other. Running away looks like, at least to me, looks like making sure I'm not one of the crazy people who's doing that thing, right? And so calling that stuff out, and
You know something?
it's really just antagonism of a different sort.
It just occurs to me that I also feel threatened.
Yep.
I feel threatened by the system.
Mm-hmm.
I feel threatened for all of us because of the system. I feel threatened for the African American youth. I feel threatened for the poor. I feel threatened for not just the US, but I feel threatened for the people in India who are stuck in the cities and who are trying to get home and have no food or water. I feel threatened for the animals that are in the factory farms that are, I mean, they're under more stress than anybody else. They don't even know if they're going to eat, and they might just be euthanized with a bag over their heads because they're not going to be murdered in the slaughterhouse anymore.
Right.
So I feel threatened for everything that's going on.
Right.
And I feel this huge threat. But apparently, somehow, through my life, even though there was authoritarianism in my household, I was spanked. You know, when I did something wrong that wasn't on time, if I broke something which required money to bring in, which is time to fix, you know. I mean, I wouldn't say that I was spanked, like beaten, like, you know, I became a person who is a sociopath, but like I think is probably typical of people of our age in Michigan, at least, if not in the US in general. But I'm not looking for a leader, because I mean, the leader is all of us together. We all have something to add. You have something to add to this. The other people I've been talking to on this channel have something to add to this. The people, not just yourself who I sent that piece to this morning, they each have something interesting to add to this.
Sure.
And that's where knowledge is. It's the community that has the knowledge. It's not one individual. And in fact, I don't care if it's the governor or a prime minister or a president or an emperor or a king or a queen or whatever. One person does not, I mean, that's an authoritarian situation, really. That's the strict father who spanked us because we didn't do what we went to do. Or it could be also the strict mother. Mothers can take on that role as well.
Absolutely.
But it's an authoritarian thing. And this is where I especially wanted to talk to you, because growing up in a Catholic family, a family that practiced Catholicism, I think there's a conflict in the Bible with this. Are you willing to go into that?
I'm just noting our time.
Yeah.
And that is 15 minutes. That might be another conversation, but I'm willing to talk about it. But I want you to understand that Catholics don't follow the Bible. Catholics follow the Pope. And so
who is a leader? Who's a one?
Who's a leader, right? Who is, according to Catholicism, ordained by God, passed down from Jesus to Peter, his apostle, who became a disciple, right? Apostles, the follower, disciples, the one who goes out and...
The Pope is basically God's presence on earth now. Right. Who is, Pope means father.
Yes. And so Catholics, they know the Bible, sort of, kind of. But it was the Protestant Reformation and Martin Luther who said, take the Bible out of the hands of priests and let people read it for themselves and have their own relationship with God, that really allowed that particular theology to become separate from Catholicism. Now, obviously, you know, the further away you get, Lutheranism is fairly close, and Episcopalian and Anglican. There are several sects of Protestantism that are similar enough to Catholic that if you were unaware of many of the theological differences and we're just experiencing the worship service itself, you would go, not too much, not too different, not too different.
All time-based too, time-based. During a Catholic service, anybody who hasn't been to one, it's exactly the same lesson plan every single time. The only difference is the little sermon, which is maybe 5 to 10 minutes long, and maybe the songs change a little bit. And this is, it's cyclical though.
It's
I mean,
3 years, it's on a 3-year cycle. So yeah, and that is all dictated by, well, I think that, there's a whole section of bureaucracy within the Vatican and the Pope and the College of Cardinals and all of that about who decides what's in the cycle, the liturgical year. But yeah, it is all about that very strong father and paying obeisance to that. Not
and control.
And control, and not doing things your own way, right? Not doing things the way you think they ought to be done, but following the rules.
And now, you're told which part of the Bible to attend to, and you're told which lesson in the Bible to attend to. Now, I feel fortunate that the story of Jesus on Sermon on the Mount was actually told, and that the story of his going into the temple and pushing away the money was actually told, because those are critical parts of the real story.
Sure.
But it's wrapped around all this other control, all this.
And then we could get into the whole Council of Nicaea and which gospels and which writings that were being used throughout the early church were deemed heretical or unimportant, or no, we're not going to include that because it didn't follow the strong father, only this way sort of thing.
Well, I know.
Conversation for another day.
Well, and I know our time is running short. So I just want to make sure to put this point in this particular video. When reading the end of the Sermon on the Mount, which was Jesus's most important lesson to the people, the most important lesson he had, he basically said, love is the new commandment. Nurturing is the new commandment. Helping other people is the new commandment. Being compassionate and altruistic is the new commandment. And the reason that we're in this conundrum that we're in right now, this predicament at the time, which was a predicament very, in some ways, parallel to the one we're in now, is because we are not acknowledging that. And this one has to be lifted above the 10 commandments as the prime one. And God has told me this, however you want to interpret that this is the most important thing. And so, when someone comes up and they smack you, you're not going to smack them back. And someone takes your cloak, you're not going to fight. You're not going to use violence against them. When someone is perceived as an enemy, you're going to be kind to them rather than trying to violate them. And the struggle is not external to be like God. The struggle is internal to be compassionate and to control this part, right here, this fight or flight. But it still has a role. I mean, right now I'm fighting for all of us, I feel like, rather than fleeing, rather than following whoever the strict father happens to be, who I believe to be the strict father at the moment. I just wanted to insert that before we end.
I'm glad you did. And so I guess the thoughts now come to, are you going to actually address it to this person who wrote to you? Is this a thing that you have now just put out here for all of your viewers and or whomever else stumbles upon this in years to come? Are you going to write another essay? Is that, like, how are you going to address the person who made comments? And then are you going to then separate that from how you're going to address sort of the larger community?
Well, my fear, and not just my fear, but the fear of Nicole Foss, who's also on this channel, and some others, is that the United States and the world in general are headed towards an authoritarian, top-down, ultimate, full control, 100% control situation, where there's one person who has ultimate control of everything. In other words, a dictator, a king, a fascism. It's called a fascism.
It is.
And the people who are scared and who only have not had the opportunity yet to connect with how powerful community is, like neighbors, and connecting with neighbors and other people, and how to address problems in an unrushed way, they are going to just be looking for someone who says it's going to be okay, and it's these people over here, and if we just got rid of them, we'd be okay. And if these people over there, it's their fault, you know, so let's get them out of the way. And, you know, for example, it's everybody who's not part of our country. It's everybody who has ever come into our country recently. If they don't have their papers, it's their fault. Right. If they're out of this, if it's China, it's their fault. If it's Russia, it's their fault. If it's Africa, it's their fault. You know, it's their fault. So we should cut ourselves off into our houses. We shouldn't talk to our neighbors anymore. We should cut off the internet so we can't communicate, not just to each other within the country, but anyone outside of the country. We certainly shouldn't go anywhere else. We shouldn't see how other people live, you know. And we should become just like those other authoritarian places like North Korea, and just like Russia during Stalin, even though it started as a very communal place, that didn't last long though, because the structure, as soon as the structure built, it became authoritarian almost instantly. And so that's the thing that not just but I think we are all going to need to recognize that this is happening right now in real time.
Yeah.
And the thing that we can do with our own agency is reach out like this, you know, share across all the networks we have, and in person by reaching out to the people who are actually physically near us and showing them compassion and giving, and actually giving, just like Jesus gave. He gave to everybody, right? I mean, that was his whole thing, that look at me, I'm going to give everything I have. I'm going to have nothing at all. I'm going to give everything. I'm going to give all my time, all my attention. I'm going to give my life. I'm going to give every little bit of me. And just look what happens when you give everything that you have, and you don't resist when people try to come and take your life. You know, he didn't resist the empire when it came and took him in front of the Pontius Pilate or whoever. He didn't resist when he was carrying the cross. He didn't resist when he was on the cross. I mean, he decided, I think in the desert, it was very interesting. He decided that this is really, I mean, humans are compassionate animals. I mean, that's the base of what makes communities strong. And he decided that, you know, the only way to get out of this, I mean, I love everybody. I mean, they're all my family. I've lived here since I was a kid. You know, I've been a carpenter here. I've seen the suffering. You know, everybody's suffering so much. The owners have everything. We have nothing. They don't even let us farm anymore. And people are scared. And instead of going the authoritarian route, which probably has happened any number of times in history, he went the opposite route, which was to say we need to come together as a community and love each other. And God is love, literally, he says, basically. You know, I don't know the line and verse, but, and this is how we're going to get forward. And that's what is called Christianity. But Christianity, as you said, is not necessarily what's taught in organized religion.
There you go. And we as a group of humans, because we are always evolving, I think that it makes sense that our religions also need to evolve. They need to be more like Jesus, right? Our Christian religions actually have become these places of walls and of shutting people out and negating other things. And there's way more to be done. There's way more evolution to happen for organized religion to become a way in which people come together to honor that which is holy to them.
Well, and I question whether there even is what the place is for organized religion. I mean, I attended, I have been in search for a church that I can feel family in for, you know, a long time. And one of the ones I went to, it was basically just people sitting together in a circle, contemplating the lessons of the Bible. And if someone had a thought, like an insight, they would just say the insight, and that was it. And then if, you know, 20 minutes later, somebody else had another insight, they'd put the insight out.
Okay, so it was a Friends Quaker group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's necessary to give a name, but because it's just the
Well,
practice that's interesting.
But it is because that particular sect is the only one that I've experienced that does that particular style of worship.
And that's where remember our last call, that's where that clearness committee practice comes from.
Of course it does.
It's part of the Quaker tradition, and that's where Parker Palmer got it.
Yeah, that I was just going to say, because Parker Palmer, yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I will tell you that if I were to be a Christian, if that were something that I felt the need to do. Well,
you believe in love, though, right?
Yes, I do.
I'm not saying that you believe in Jesus as a magical figure, but
I don't believe in a savior, and I think that is the crux of the Christian tradition, is the savior piece. And I don't actually feel that that's necessary or helpful, but the Quaker tradition of allowing anyone who has insight, who is moved, to speak that truth that is given to them in the quiet of their heart, is a powerful statement for connection to the divine. And I think that is certainly not, it's not exclusive to Christianity. There are other sects that also have that style of celebrating together, but it is it's unique enough that it calls people in. And it also scares people who are not willing to have that kind of internal experience, but really do want to go with a strong father figure, and do want to go where they tell you what to do and when to do it and how to do it and all of that. And I want there to be space for all of that, as long as the basis of it is community, connection, and love. I don't know exactly if that's possible with that also top-down hierarchical structure.
Well, as we wrap up, I'd like to point out that I really appreciate you calling out the savior part of it, because I was not recognizing that, I don't think. Because I resonate with the love part and how a person can demonstrate love, but identifying that practice with an individual makes them into a savior. And an authority, even though it's a practice that we're talking about, a practice, an emotion, a givingness, whatever you want to call it. So, and that's the difference between why I struggle and those who are eco-feminists, for example, still identify me as a patriarchal human, and why I'm trying to reach out to women, especially because I don't identify that naturally in myself necessarily.
That's fair. That's fair. I've had a lot of time and inclination to unpack that patriarchal baggage. So I enjoy speaking with you so much.
I enjoy speaking with you too.
It's a really lovely way to spend some time this afternoon.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me. And for anybody that's been on the call, if you appreciate that we shared this with you, if you got anything at all out of it, please, let us know by putting thumb up. And this entire channel is about this struggle between compassion, actually a compassionate future, and a strict father authoritarian future. And I didn't realize that until maybe today. And if you would like, I invite you to put something in the comments. I invite you to subscribe and to sign up for email notifications. And I want to thank you for viewing, especially because, you know, the videos on this channel are not typical. I mean, these videos are meant to be the compassionate conversations where we're not cutting each other off every 10 or 20 seconds. They're not meant to be authoritarian, even though I know I come across as authoritarian sometimes. The call, Diana, you don't know this. The call that I had on Monday, this week, Monday, with Nicole Foss from New Zealand, we talked for 6 hours.
I saw your note about that, and I thought, okay, did you take a break from the bathroom or food or something? Because migration is, that's a long time to be sitting in a chair. I like you a lot, but 6 hours feels like I might have to leave.
All right.
Good.
Oh, any last words from you?
No, I feel complete. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, and see you next time.